You think you're in control, but deep down, there's a quiet anger that never really goes away. It's the kind that simmers beneath the surface, making you feel tense and on edge, even when nothing is wrong. You tell yourself you're fine, that you don't let things get to you, but the truth is, you're constantly fighting a battle you can't see. In this video, we'll explore why you hold on to this anger without realizing it, and how it shapes your everyday life. By the end, you might start to see the invisible chains that keep you from feeling truly free. Think about those moments when you feel a sudden rush of irritation over something small, like a coworker's comment or a family member's habit. You brush it off, say it's nothing, but inside, it eats at you. Or maybe you find yourself avoiding conflicts, always trying to keep the peace, only to feel drained and resentful later. This isn't just about being patient. It's about a deeper pattern where you suppress your true feelings to avoid discomfort. Freud often pointed out that what we push down doesn't disappear. It finds other ways to surface. In daily life, this shows up as constant stress, unexplained sadness, or even physical tension. You might feel like you're walking on eggshells, afraid that if you let go, everything will fall apart. It's a common struggle, one that many face without knowing why they can't just let things roll off their back. The roots of this hidden anger often go back to childhood, to times when expressing yourself felt unsafe or was met with disapproval. Imagine a young boy like Michael growing up in a home where anger was seen as bad or dangerous. Whenever he felt upset, he was told to be quiet or to stop crying, so he learned to bury those emotions deep inside. Over time, this became a habit. Instead of feeling anger, he felt guilt or shame. Freud's ideas remind us that our early experiences shape our unconscious mind, creating blueprints for how we handle emotions as adults. For Michael, and perhaps for you, those old wounds taught that anger is something to be feared, not understood. It's not about blaming the past, but seeing how those moments built a wall around your feelings, making it hard to connect with what you truly feel now. When you keep repressing anger, it doesn't just vanish, it builds up, leading to emotional collapse. You might notice yourself repeating the same patterns, snapping at loved ones, feeling overly critical, or withdrawing when things get intense. This repetition is your mind's way of trying to resolve what was never dealt with. Freud called this the compulsion to repeat, where we unconsciously recreate old scenarios to gain control, but it only brings more pain. The cost is high: constant fatigue, strained relationships, and a sense of being trapped in your own reactions. You might feel like you're losing pieces of yourself, bit by bit, as the anger seeps out in ways you never intended. It's a heavy burden to carry, one that can make life feel like a series of reactions rather than conscious choices. Understanding this pattern is the first step toward change. When you see that your anger isn't a flaw but a signal from your unconscious, it becomes easier to approach it with compassion. Freud taught that bringing these hidden feelings into the light can lessen their power. For Michael, realizing that his childhood taught him to fear anger helped him start acknowledging it without judgment. Similarly, you might begin to notice when those old triggers arise and ask yourself what's really behind the irritation. It's not about eliminating anger, but about understanding its source so you can respond instead of react. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but with awareness, you can start to untangle the knots that keep you stuck in cycles of suppression and outburst. Now, I want you to pause for a moment and think. When was the last time you felt a surge of anger and quickly pushed it away? What if, instead of hiding it, you allowed yourself to feel it, just for a second, without judgment? If this video made you reflect on your own hidden emotions, consider liking and subscribing for more insights into the human mind. Thank you for listening. You might believe that by never showing anger, you're protecting yourself and others, but this silence comes at a steep price. It's not just about holding back words, it's about burying a part of who you are, and over time, that buried anger starts to shape your world in ways you never intended. In this part, we'll look at how this suppression affects your relationships, your health, and your inner peace, and why facing it is the only way to find real freedom. Consider how often you find yourself in situations where you feel misunderstood or taken for granted. Maybe it's with a partner like Laura, who always seems to push your buttons, or a friend who never listens, and you just smile and nod to keep the peace. On the surface, it seems harmless, but underneath, resentment builds. Freud highlighted that repressed emotions don't stay hidden. They leak out in subtle ways, like passive-aggressive comments, constant criticism of others, or even physical symptoms like headaches and insomnia. You might notice that you're always tired, or that small frustrations feel overwhelming. This isn't a coincidence. It's your body and mind reacting to the weight of unexpressed feelings. In everyday life, this can lead to a cycle where you attract people who trigger those old wounds, reinforcing the belief that anger is dangerous and must be avoided at all costs. The origins of this pattern often trace back to early experiences where expressing anger was met with punishment or indifference. Think of a girl like Olivia, who grew up in a household where conflicts were swept under the rug. Whenever she felt angry, she was told to be the good girl and not make a fuss, so she learned to equate anger with being unlovable. As Freud suggested, these childhood lessons become ingrained in our unconscious, dictating how we interact with the world as adults. For Olivia, and perhaps for you, anger became tied to fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, or fear of losing control. It's not about pointing fingers at the past, but recognizing how those moments taught you to silence your true emotions, creating a barrier that keeps you from authentic connections. When anger is consistently repressed, it doesn't just fade away, it accumulates, leading to emotional breakdowns and repetitive behaviors. You might catch yourself in the same arguments with different people, or feel a sense of emptiness after avoiding confrontation. Freud described this as the repetition compulsion, where we unconsciously reenact painful scenarios in an attempt to master them, but it only deepens the wound. The toll is immense. Strained relationships where trust erodes, a constant undercurrent of anxiety, and a feeling of being disconnected from your own desires. You might start to see life as a series of obligations rather than choices, and the anger you've buried can manifest as sudden outbursts over trivial things, leaving you confused and guilty. It's a heavy load to bear, one that can make you feel isolated even in a crowd. Gaining insight into this process can be liberating. When you understand that your suppressed anger is a protective mechanism from the past, it loses its power to control you. Freud believed that awareness is the key to breaking free from these cycles. For Olivia, realizing that her childhood taught her to fear anger allowed her to start expressing it in small, safe ways, like journaling or talking to a trusted friend. Similarly, you can begin to identify the triggers that set off those hidden emotions and explore what they're really about. It's not about unleashing rage, but about acknowledging the hurt beneath the anger so you can heal rather than hide. This understanding doesn't solve everything instantly, but it opens the door to a more honest and fulfilling way of living. Now, take a moment to reflect. In what areas of your life do you feel the most resentment building up? And what would happen if you gave yourself permission to acknowledge that anger without fear? If this part resonated with you, feel free to like and subscribe for more conversations about the hidden parts of our minds. Thank you for being here. You keep finding yourself in the same frustrating situations, wondering why you can't break free. But the answer lies in the patterns you learned long ago. It's as if you're stuck in a loop, repeating old hurts without even realizing it, and this cycle keeps you from moving forward. In this part, we'll explore how these repetitions work, why they feel so familiar, and what it takes to step out of them for good. Notice how often you react to certain people or events in ways that surprise even you. Maybe it's with a colleague like Robert, whose criticism makes you shut down, or a family member whose words trigger a defensive response. On the surface, it seems like a normal reaction, but if you look closer, you might see that you're replaying scenes from your past. Freud taught us that the unconscious mind holds on to early experiences, and when we encounter something similar, we fall into old habits to protect ourselves. In daily life, this shows up as overreacting to minor slights, feeling overly responsible for others' emotions, or avoiding situations that remind you of childhood conflicts. You might think you're handling things well, but in reality, you're letting those buried feelings dictate your actions, leading to a sense of powerlessness and confusion. The source of this repetition often starts in childhood, where you learned how to cope with difficult emotions. Imagine a boy like Nicholas, who grew up with a parent who was quick to anger. To avoid conflict, he learned to stay quiet and please others, burying his own needs and frustrations. Over time, this became his default way of dealing with stress, and as an adult, he finds himself in relationships where he feels unheard and resentful, just like he did as a child. Freud's insights remind us that these early adaptations shape our unconscious, making us seek out familiar dynamics, even if they're painful. For Nicholas, and perhaps for you, the repetition isn't a choice, but a deep-seated attempt to resolve old wounds, though it often just reinforces the pain. When you're caught in this cycle, the emotional toll can be overwhelming. You might experience bursts of anger or sadness that seem out of proportion, or feel drained after interactions that should have been simple. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, where we unconsciously recreate past traumas to gain a sense of control, but it only leads to more suffering. The consequences are real: damaged relationships, chronic stress, and a feeling of being trapped in a story you didn't write. You might notice that you attract people who mirror those from your past, or that you sabotage opportunities for happiness because they feel unfamiliar and scary. It's a heavy burden, one that can make life feel like a series of reactions rather than conscious choices, leaving you wondering why you can't just change. Understanding why you repeat these patterns can be a turning point. When you see that they're not failures, but protective strategies from your unconscious, you can start to approach them with kindness instead of criticism. Freud believed that bringing this awareness into the light is the first step toward healing. For Nicholas, realizing that his need to please others came from a fear of anger helped him begin to set boundaries and express his true feelings. Similarly, you can learn to recognize the triggers that set off these cycles and explore the deeper fears behind them. It's not about blaming yourself, but about acknowledging the hurt and giving yourself the space to respond differently. This process takes time, but with patience, you can break free from the repetition and start living more authentically. Now, pause and ask yourself, what familiar patterns do you see in your life, and how might they be connected to experiences from your past? If this reflection touched something in you, consider liking and subscribing for more insights into the human heart. Thank you for listening. You try so hard to keep your anger in check, believing it's the right thing to do. But what if that control is rooted in a deeper fear you've carried since childhood? It's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about protecting yourself from feelings you were taught to see as dangerous. And this fear keeps you trapped in a cycle of suppression. In this part, we'll uncover how fear drives your reactions, how it connects to your past, and what happens when you start to face it with honesty. Think about the times when you feel a surge of anger but quickly push it down, telling yourself it's not worth the trouble. Maybe it's with a friend like Cynthia, who often cancels plans, and instead of saying how it hurts, you just shrug it off. Or perhaps at work, when a boss like Donald makes a demanding request and you agree without question, even though it leaves you feeling overwhelmed. On the surface, it seems like maturity, but underneath, it's fear. Fear of being seen as difficult, fear of rejection, or fear of losing control. Freud pointed out that our unconscious mind holds these fears from early life, and they shape how we handle emotions today. In everyday situations, this fear shows up as constant anxiety, people-pleasing behaviors, or even physical symptoms like a tight chest or restless sleep. You might notice that you're always preparing for the worst, as if letting your guard down would invite chaos, and this vigilance drains the joy out of simple moments. The roots of this fear often go back to childhood experiences where expressing anger led to negative consequences. Imagine a girl like Amelia, who grew up in a home where anger was met with cold silence or punishment. Whenever she felt upset, she learned to hide it to avoid feeling abandoned or shamed. Over time, this fear became ingrained in her unconscious, telling her that anger equals danger. Freud's ideas help us see that these early lessons create a blueprint for adulthood, where we associate strong emotions with threat. For Amelia, and maybe for you, fear isn't just an emotion. It's a survival strategy that once protected you, but now limits your ability to be true to yourself. It's not about blaming those early years, but understanding how they taught you to equate anger with loss, making it hard to express what you really feel. When fear controls your anger, the emotional cost can be immense. You might find yourself in repetitive patterns where you attract situations that confirm your fears, like relationships where you're not heard or jobs where you feel undervalued. Freud described this as the repetition compulsion, where we unconsciously seek out familiar pain to try and master it, but it only deepens the wound. The toll includes chronic stress, feelings of isolation, and a sense that you're living someone else's life. You might experience sudden outbursts when the fear becomes too much, leaving you confused and guilty. Or you might withdraw entirely to avoid any risk of conflict. It's a heavy weight to carry, one that can make you feel stuck in a loop of anticipation and regret, wondering why you can't just let go and be yourself. Gaining clarity on this fear can be a powerful shift. When you recognize that your suppressed anger is really a mask for deeper fears, you can start to address the root cause instead of just the symptoms. Freud believed that bringing these unconscious fears into awareness is key to breaking free. For Amelia, realizing that her fear of anger came from childhood helped her slowly test the waters of expression, like speaking up in small ways and seeing that the world didn't end. Similarly, you can begin to identify what you're truly afraid of, whether it's being alone, not being liked, or losing control, and explore how those fears influence your reactions. It's not about eliminating fear, but about understanding it so you can choose how to respond rather than react automatically. This process isn't quick, but with each step, you reclaim a piece of yourself and move toward a more authentic life. Now, take a moment to reflect. What is the deepest fear that holds you back from expressing anger, and how might acknowledging it change your relationships? If this part spoke to you, feel free to like and subscribe for more honest conversations about the mind. Thank you for being here. You've spent so long holding back your anger, thinking it keeps you safe, but what if true safety comes from letting yourself feel it fully? It's not about losing control, it's about finding the courage to face what you've hidden, and in that honesty, discovering a new way to live. In this part, we'll explore how to move from suppression to expression, step by step, and what it means to reclaim your emotional truth without fear. Think about the small moments when you could choose to speak up instead of staying silent. Maybe it's with a sibling like Joshua, who always interrupts you, and instead of seething inside, you gently say how it makes you feel. Or at work, when a colleague like Brenda takes credit for your ideas, and you find a calm way to assert yourself. On the surface, it might seem risky, but underneath, it's an act of self-respect. Freud often emphasized that bringing unconscious feelings to light reduces their power, and in daily life, this shift can start with simple actions. You might notice that when you allow yourself to express anger in healthy ways, like through honest conversations or setting boundaries, the constant tension begins to ease. Instead of feeling drained, you feel more present, and relationships can deepen because you're showing up as your true self, not a version shaped by fear. The foundation for this change often lies in understanding how your past shaped your reactions. Imagine a woman like Carol, who grew up in a family where anger was met with ridicule, so she learned to swallow her feelings to avoid mockery. As an adult, she realized that this pattern kept her from forming genuine connections. Freud's ideas remind us that our unconscious holds these old scripts, but we can rewrite them with awareness. For Carol, and perhaps for you, the key was to see that expressing anger doesn't have to lead to the same outcomes as in childhood. It's not about erasing the past, but learning from it, so you can respond to current situations with clarity instead of old fears. By reflecting on those early experiences, you can start to separate then from now and give yourself permission to feel what you truly feel. When you begin to express anger instead of repressing it, the emotional landscape shifts. You might still feel afraid at first, but over time, the repetitive cycles start to break. Freud described how the compulsion to repeat fades when we confront our unconscious motives, and in practice, this means fewer outbursts and less internal turmoil. The benefits include reduced stress, improved relationships, and a sense of agency in your life. You might find that you're no longer attracting the same toxic dynamics, or that you can handle conflicts without falling apart. It's not a perfect process. There might be setbacks, like moments of guilt or doubt. But each time you choose honesty over suppression, you build resilience. This isn't about becoming angry all the time. It's about using anger as a signal to address what's wrong, so you can live with more integrity and less regret. Embracing this path requires patience and self-compassion. When you acknowledge that your anger is a natural part of being human, not something to be ashamed of, you can start to integrate it into your life in healthy ways. Freud believed that this integration is essential for psychological well-being. For Carol, it meant starting small, like writing down her feelings or talking to a therapist, and gradually feeling more comfortable expressing herself. Similarly, you can practice by noticing when anger arises and asking what it's trying to tell you. Is it about a boundary being crossed, a need not being met, or an old wound being triggered? It's not about acting on every impulse, but about listening and responding thoughtfully. This approach doesn't eliminate challenges, but it transforms them into opportunities for growth, helping you move from a life of reaction to one of conscious choice. Now, pause and consider. What is one small step you could take today to honor your anger instead of hiding it? And how might that change how you see yourself? If this part inspired you to look inward, feel free to like and subscribe for more guidance on the human experience. Thank you for listening. After all this exploration, you might wonder if it's possible to truly change, to stop letting old anger and fear run your life. The answer isn't in fighting those feelings, but in welcoming them as part of who you are, and in that acceptance, finding a deeper peace. In this final part, we'll bring everything together, showing how embracing your full emotional self, anger included, can lead to a life of greater authenticity and connection, inspired by Freud's wisdom that true freedom comes from understanding, not suppression. Think back to where we started, that quiet anger simmering beneath the surface, the fear that kept you from expressing it, and the repetitive patterns that left you feeling stuck. Now, imagine what it would be like to approach those moments with curiosity instead of dread. For instance, when a friend like Michelle forgets an important date, instead of burying your disappointment, you might share how it made you feel, not to blame, but to connect. Or at home, with a parent like Harold, whose comments used to trigger old wounds, you could respond with clarity rather than defensiveness. Freud often said that the unconscious speaks through our emotions, and when we listen, we transform our relationships with ourselves and others. In everyday life, this means less internal conflict, more genuine interactions, and a sense that you're no longer hiding parts of yourself to please the world. You might find that as you integrate anger into your emotional palette, it loses its destructive edge and becomes a guide to your needs and boundaries. The journey to this point often requires looking back with compassion at how your past shaped you. Recall stories like Michael's, Olivia's, or Carol's, each carrying childhood lessons that taught them to fear anger. Freud's insights remind us that these early experiences aren't chains, but clues to our unconscious mind. By acknowledging them, you can see that your reactions aren't random, they're echoes of old attempts to survive. For you, this might mean recognizing that the anger you feel today isn't just about the present moment. It's often tied to unmet needs from long ago. It's not about dwelling in the past, but using it as a map to understand why you feel the way you do, so you can respond with intention rather than habit. This reflection helps dissolve the shame around anger, allowing you to see it as a natural human emotion that, when honored, can lead to healing. As you practice this integration, the emotional weight begins to lift. The repetition compulsion that Freud described, where you unconsciously reenact painful scenarios, starts to fade because you're no longer trying to resolve old wounds in new situations. Instead, you might notice a growing sense of agency, fewer sudden outbursts, less anxiety, and relationships that feel more supportive. The cost of repression, chronic stress, isolation, and feeling trapped gives way to benefits like increased resilience, deeper connections, and a clearer sense of self. It's not that life becomes perfect. There will still be challenges and moments of anger. But now you have the tools to navigate them without being controlled by fear or guilt. This shift is gradual, built on small, consistent choices to be honest with yourself and others, and it leads to a life where you feel more whole and less fragmented. Ultimately, this process is about coming home to yourself, embracing all your emotions, including anger, as valid and valuable. Freud believed that self-awareness is the path to psychological health, and by bringing your unconscious feelings into the light, you reclaim your power. It's not about never getting angry or letting others affect you. It's about understanding why you do so you can choose how to respond. This doesn't mean you'll always get it right, but with each step, you build a foundation of self-compassion and truth. Remember, anger isn't the enemy. It's a messenger, pointing to what matters most to you. By listening to it, you open the door to a more authentic, fulfilling life, free from the invisible chains that once held you back. Now, as we close, I invite you to reflect. How has this exploration changed your perspective on anger, and what one insight will you carry forward to live more fully? If this series has helped you see yourself more clearly, please like and subscribe for more conversations that delve into the depths of the human experience. Thank you for joining me on this journey.